If you're new in town or just new to this whole podcast thing, you're tuning in to Law by Night, the podcast that discusses all things vampiric with no fear of breaching the Masquerade. In this episode, I will decide and unveil which historical edition of Werewolf the Apocalypse is the best edition of the goth savage classic. We will look at its core book, a brief overview of the metaplot, and mechanical differences. Since 1999, fans of Werewolf the Dark Ages have been heavily debating which edition of Werewolf is the ultimate compilation of the material. Unfortunately for all of them, all of their answers have been both subjectively and objectively incorrect. Objectively, because the better version of Werewolf the Dark Ages is the one that works best for your table. Simple really, well, apparently not, as you're not interested in clear-cut cop-out answers. No! You're here for the subjectively based opinion of your Lord and Saviour, which, as far as this video is concerned, is the objective truth, and if you don't like that, up your dosage of copium. As of the writing and recording of this goated script, we have two versions of the Dark Ages flavour of Werewolf the Dark Ages and Dark Ages Werewolf, which is definitely not confusing in the slightest. But these aren't the only Werewolf the Apocalypse books with a different setting, for there is also Werewolf the Wild West to factor in as well. Werewolf the Dark Ages was released on the 28th of April 1999, and it's the tone that Werewolf the Apocalypse is much different of that to Werewolf fans young and older used to, where the horrors of the world of darkness are at its most rural, instilling fears in the hearts of mortal and supernatural alike. They are the horror of the stories to keep medieval children in line and the jailers keeping kindred locked up in their cities. As a game, however, it actually serves as a source book for Vampire the Dark Ages, which may be a contributing factor into the near absence of metaplot and the focus on the disturbing brutality of the ye old guru of yesteryear. As such, it uses a modified version of 2nd edition rules with some modified abilities such as drive becoming ride to better fit the setting existing solely in this book. What is there, however, is interesting enough to make it stand out and feel different to its modern times descendants. In the Dark Ages, tribes remain tightly bound to their own kin, prioritizing familial ties over bridging divides with tribes of differing customs and cultures. The Red Talons and the Warders of Men, the precursors to the modern Glasswalkers, share title in common and even less reason to avoid clashing over territorial disputes. Travel is perilous, even for the Guru, leading to tribes like the Fianna being rare in regions dominated by the Silent Striders. The Native American tribes are absent here, and the Geta Fenris are simply the Fenrir. It's important to note, however, that the worm lacks the human-led face here, and the Black Spiral Dancers are in their infancy, serving as boogeymen to the foolish and naive Guru of the late 12th century. The release of Dark Ages Werewolf on the 3rd of March 2003 decided to focus more on the Werewolf metaplot, while still maintaining the idea that it is a vampire sourcebook, this time being Dark Ages Vampire. While familiar structures and relationships of Werewolf the Dark Ages are still present in Dark Ages Werewolf, the newer Dark Ages corebook distinguished itself by intertwining with the historical events of Dark Ages Vampire, emphasizing the fall of Constantinople and the sweeping changes it brings to Europe. This era is one of prophecy, marking perhaps the first time the Guru as a society began widely recognizing the signs of impending apocalypse. We begin to see the Guru torn between their roles as apex predators and guardians of society. Werewolves serve as both providers and protectors of their kin, yet they are irresistibly drawn to the power and the ever-present lure of danger. Across the globe, Guru answers these challenges with unmatched ferocity. This decay of nobility and isolation persists across the core book as signs of the titular apocalypse rear its head, and some Theurges take note. Beyond this, both Dark Ages Werewolf and Werewolf the Dark Ages feel like their own games of shapeshifters making a name for themselves, the former using a modified version of revised edition rules, the most notable changes being the lack of renown. The same cannot be said for Werewolf the Wild West, which does feature the renown within its modified revised edition rule set. Werewolf the Wild West was released May or June of 1997, and we travel to the fertile and freshly raped lands of America. Here, the crimes of the Wormbringers, the European tribes, are fresh in the minds of the playable WtA and Wendigo, as is the fairly recent sacrifice of the Croatan, and the Glasswalkers are now the Iron Riders. The Europeans and the Guru among them up their conquering of land and infighting amongst themselves for their reputation and egos. But regarding the Guru specifically, there is much thrill and bounty to be had in the cheap Wild West. Metaplot takes a backseat in this setting, allowing the focus to remain on the immediate opportunities and territorial stakes of the Wild West. The Weaver's relentless advances across the Americas, marked by railroads and telegraph lines, loomed as a growing threat to any pack in its path. Meanwhile, robber barons, driven by greed, inadvertently aid the worm by devastating the natural order and countless lives for the sake of a few veins of gold. At its core, the Wild West frames the Guru as heroic cowboys, squaring off against the Black Spiral Dancers as the shadowy villains in black, two forces ready to draw at high noon in the heart of the frontier town. But there's obviously more to the setting than that. It is open enough to allow one to go ham with spaghetti westerns, but has enough in the fiction to remind you that the Gru have to start actually serving Gaia and weigh up the consequences of their actions. The core tone of Werewolf the Wild West lies in the contrast between the thrill of frontier life and the tragedy of colonization, as European settlers strip lands once held by the WtA, Wendigo, and Croatan to claim themselves for themselves. While the Gru pack might revel in the camaraderie of a poker game at the saloon outside of the town's borders, werewolves rage against the desecration of their homeland, thirsting for vengeance. The Werewolf the Wild West setting is more so than the other Werewolf the Apocalypse games about exploration, ambition, and fury, where anger often leads more to anger. The cowboys in this era, driven by greed and ignorance, disrupt the status quo to enrich themselves, further marginalizing indigenous peoples and the shapeshifter tribes amongst them. Guru strive to carry out their legacies, whether as gunslingers, gamblers, saloon owners, or prospectors clinging to the key pieces of the land. Glory is coveted, while honor and wisdom frequently fall by the wayside. Packs may choose not to tread the path of destruction, yet many do, unwittingly feeding the worm's hunger as they poison the earth beneath them. Such stories place the Guru in a complex role, able to perpetuate or perhaps curb the worst excesses of the Wild West. But in this era of boundless opportunity and ruthless ambition, one truth remains: there's always profits to be made, and life is devastatingly cheap. So, having explained each edition for you for the last 10-ish minutes, which one is the best and where would others go in relation to that? Now, if we're looking at the core books alone, it would be from best to not so best: Werewolf the Wild West, Werewolf the Dark Ages, and Dark Ages Werewolf. Now, I am sure there are many of you who have already left a comment about your favourite edition and why my takes are on, and you know what, that's absolutely fine. Some of you may agree with me, and that is also fine. I will reiterate what I said at the beginning of this video: the best version of any game is the one that you all enjoy playing with your friends at your table, as long as you're all having fun, and that's all that matters, and no one should poo-poo on other people's parades for playing a version of a game that you don't like. To be kept updated, follow the Law by Night VTM Instagram and Blue Sky pages to find out when we upload each episode. You can also find out by subscribing to the YouTube channel and clicking on the little bell, as you'll be immediately notified when the latest episode is live. Until next time, farewell.